The Vigilant Resolve floated silently in the cold black of space, her hull scarred from past skirmishes, her engines humming low like a beast at rest. She was alone at the edge of the outer spiral rim, an empty, distant part of the galaxy where stars were few and silence ruled. This was not a place for heroes. It was where patrols disappeared and maps grew old. Commander Alara Miles stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the vast, star-dotted void ahead. She was 34, sharp-eyed, calm as stone, and known for her quiet confidence. Her uniform was clean but worn at the edges. Like the ship, she had seen battle, and like the ship, she had never broken. The silence was shattered when a soft tone rang from the comm station. "Commander," said Ensign Dara, her voice tight with concern. "We're receiving a priority transmission from command. It's encrypted and urgent." Alara stepped forward, gave a small nod. "Patch it through." The holographic display flickered, then snapped into focus. Admiral Bryn Tark's tired face appeared. Static cut through his voice, but the message was clear. "Alara. Drekker fleet, heading toward the Centauri corridor, 6 warships confirmed. Reinforcements will not reach your position in time. You are the last ship in the sector. Delay them if you can. Protect the corridor." The signal died. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Lieutenant Kale spoke from weapons. "6 Drekker ships? We don't stand a chance." "We don't need a chance," Alara said calmly. "We just need to buy time." Kale looked at her. "You want to fight them?" "Yes," she said. "They're heading for a trade corridor used by civilian transports. If they get through, they'll hit unarmed colonies. We hold the line." The crew exchanged glances. Some were afraid. Others nodded. No one spoke against her. Alara turned to the helm. "Nav, begin calculating optimal positions for a defensive stand. Put us between the corridor and their most likely approach vector." "Yes, Commander," the pilot replied. Alara left the bridge and walked the metal hulls of her ship, boots clicking quietly on the deck. The Vigilant Resolve was not a large warship, but she was fast, well-armed, and held a crew of just under 100. Many were young. Too young, maybe, but they were loyal and trained. She stopped by engineering. Chief Ramos was checking power relays. He looked up. "Heard the news, ma'am. We holding?" "We are." He nodded once. "Then we'll keep her running." Down in the crew quarters, she visited the mess hall. Some of the crew looked up from half-eaten meals, as tired but attentive. "We've got incoming," she said plainly. "The Drekker want the corridor. We're going to stop them." Silence again. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon, the whole room applauded, not out of joy, but out of respect. They knew the risks. They also knew their commander would never waste their lives unless it mattered. That night, Alara sat alone in her quarters, staring at an old photograph taped to her desk. It was from Earth. Her younger brother, smiling at his graduation. She hadn't seen him in years. Maybe she never would again. She tapped her log recorder. "Personal log, Commander Alara Miles. Entry, pre-engagement. Drekker fleet en route. No reinforcements. We're the last line. If we fall, colonies die. I will not let that happen. I don't expect to survive this. But maybe, just maybe, our stand will mean something." She closed the log and looked out the small window beside her bunk. Stars blinked quietly in the distance. Somewhere out there, the enemy was coming. And she would be waiting. 3 days passed. The crew of the Vigilant Resolve worked around the clock. Tension filled the halls like static in the air. Everyone knew the Drekker were coming. It wasn't a question of if, it was when. On the bridge, Commander Alara Miles watched the dark space beyond. Sensors swept the void in wide arcs. The crew moved with quiet urgency. No one wasted time. Every minute could be their last. Then the alert siren blared. "Contact," shouted Ensign Dara. Multiple FTL signatures, dropping out of warp, bearing 31 by 12. Alara turned to the screen. "Show me." The view screen filled with shapes, huge, jagged silhouettes against the stars. 6 Drekker warships emerged from the shadows, their hulls bristling with weapons and armor. Their lead ship was nearly twice the size of the Vigilant Resolve. "They're forming attack formation," Kale muttered, eyes on the tactical display. Alara stood tall, voice calm. "All hands to battle stations. Shields up. Lock primary weapons." The ship hummed as energy surged through her systems. Red lights flashed across the halls. Gun crews took their positions. Medics prepared triage bays. The ship was awake now, fully alert, fully ready. Suddenly, a message came through, Drekker transmission. It was audio only. The voice that spoke was deep and cold, like metal grinding against stone. This is Overlord Vraxen of the Drekker Dominion. Human vessel, you are alone. Surrender your ship and crew. We will grant you a swift end. Silence followed. Everyone looked to Alara. She walked to the comm station, tapped the button, and replied in a steady voice. This is Commander Alara Miles of the Vigilant Resolve. You will not pass. We are the line. Turn back now. Another pause. Then Vraxen replied, amused. Brave words. You will burn alone. The channel cut. Alara turned to her crew. Weapons ready? Locked and loaded, said Kale. Engage. The first shots lit up the void. Plasma bolts streaked across space. The Vigilant Resolve fired all forward batteries, striking one of the smaller Drekker ships. Its shields flared, then held. Enemy return fire followed. The ship shook violently as explosions echoed through the hull. Shields holding at 78%, called the defense officer. The crew held their positions. They had trained for this. But training didn't prepare you for the sound of metal groaning under pressure or the way the deck shuddered with every hit. Down in engineering, Chief Ramos worked with his team to stabilize power flow. Sparks rained from a ruptured conduit, but no one stopped. They had a job to do. On the bridge, Alara issued quick, clear orders. Rotate shield power to the forward quadrant. Target the lead destroyer's engine array. Fire in volleys, make every shot count. She moved from station to station, checking readings, steadying her crew. She didn't yell. She didn't panic. She didn't have to. But inside, she felt the weight. Not of fear, but of responsibility. The first hour of battle passed in a blur. One of the Drekker ships veered too close and took heavy fire. It drifted, damaged, and fell behind. But 4 others tightened their formation and pushed forward. A small voice broke the tension. Commander, said Lieutenant Arden quietly, we can't stop all of them. Alara looked at her. Arden was young, maybe 23. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked the navigation controls. Alara put a hand on her shoulder. We're not trying to stop them all, she said. We're trying to delay them. 1 minute. 5 minutes. An hour. Every second we hold is a second civilians get to escape. Arden nodded. Her hands steadied. Meanwhile, Overlord Vraxen watched from his own command ship. He stood at the center of a vast, red-lit bridge, surrounded by Drekker officers. His eyes narrowed as the humans continued to resist. They should have fallen by now, he said. They fight harder than expected, one of his aides said. They fight like prey in a corner, Vraxen replied. But even he couldn't hide the flicker of respect in his tone. Back on the Vigilant Resolve, the ship took another heavy hit. Hull integrity dropped. Fires broke out on Deck 3. Medical teams moved fast. One crewman was lost, another gravely injured. Alara made time to visit the wounded. She knelt beside a young technician, his uniform torn and bloody. Did we stop them, Commander? He whispered. We're still fighting, she said softly. You did your part. He nodded once and closed his eyes. She stood up, pain heavy in her chest. Not fear, grief. Quiet, sharp grief she couldn't afford to show. On the bridge, the status lights flickered, and the crew waited for orders. Alara returned to her chair, looked again at the enemy fleet, and said, Prepare for second wave. We're not done yet. Outside, space was on fire. Inside, the hearts of the crew burned brighter. The Vigilant Resolve was bleeding. Its hull was scorched, shields flickering, and several decks were sealed off due to damage. But the ship still moved, still fired, still held its position. Against all logic, it hadn't fallen. It refused to. On the bridge, smoke drifted through the air from a scorched console. Red lights pulsed overhead. The crew worked in silence, focused and fast. No one asked how long they could last. No one needed to. Commander Alara Miles stood at the center, her uniform torn at the shoulder from a power surge earlier, but she hadn't left her post. Her voice was steady, her eyes sharp. Status, she said. Kale wiped sweat from his forehead. 2 Drekker ships are regrouping. 1 is damaged, falling back. 3 more are pressing hard. Our portside rail gun is offline. Shields at 40%. Alara nodded. Target the closest. Prioritize its weapons array. She looked to Ensign Dara. Any word from command? Dara shook her head. No signals getting through the interference. We're still alone. Alara took a breath. She already knew that. But hearing it again made the silence outside feel heavier. In engineering, Chief Ramos crawled under a cracked reactor housing, his hands black with soot. His team worked in shifts, no sleep, just repairs. The ship's core was running hot. Too hot. If we push her any more, she's going to blow, Ramos muttered. But he didn't stop. None of them did. Down in the medical bay, bodies were lined up under sheets. One of the nurses, barely older than 20, stood trembling as she cleaned her hands. The doctor, an older woman with a cybernetic eye, put a hand on her shoulder. "Feel it later," she said quietly. "Right now, stay focused." Above them all, the battle raged. The Drekker ships fired relentlessly. Energy blasts rocked the vigilant Resolve. Every hit shook the frame. Pipes burst. Fire suppression systems kicked in. On Deck 4, a fire burned uncontrolled for 3 minutes before the crew could get it sealed. And still, Alara fought. "Redirect auxiliary power to forward shields," she ordered. "We can't let them flank us." "Aye, Commander." She moved from station to station, helping where she could, making fast decisions. But in the middle of it all, a quiet message came from communications. "Ma'am," Dara said, "we just received a distress call. Civilian freighter. They're caught in the asteroid belt on the edge of our sector. Life support's failing. They need help." Alara blinked. She hadn't expected that. A civilian ship here, now? It was terrible timing. "How many souls on board?" she asked. 215. Kale turned in his seat. "If we divert to help them, we'll expose our flank." Alara didn't answer immediately. She stared at the holographic map. The freighter was off to the side of the main corridor. Vulnerable. Unarmed. One Drekker cruiser was veering that way, likely scanning for weak targets. She made her choice. "We're not leaving them." "Commander." "We're not here to survive," she said sharply. "We're here to protect people. They need us. We move." The vigilant Resolve turned, engines flaring weakly as she shifted course. The Drekker fleet noticed. One of their ships broke formation and moved to intercept. "Brace for incoming fire," Kale warned. The ship shook as blast slammed into its rear armor. But the Resolve held together. Her rear guns fired back, buying time. They reached the freighter. Alara opened a channel. "This is Commander Alara Miles of the Vigilant Resolve. We're here. Begin emergency evacuation procedures." The freighter captain, an older man with fear in his eyes, nodded on screen. "Thank you. We didn't think anyone was coming. Get them to the escape pods. We'll cover you." Escape pods launched, small metal eggs carrying civilians into space. The Resolve extended its docking arms and caught them one by one, dragging them inside with tractor beams. Medical teams rushed to help. All the while, Drekker fire rained down. The Resolve was hit again. The rear engine was damaged. The ship drifted slightly off course. More systems failed. Sparks flew from the ceiling. On the bridge, Arden called out, "One last pod incoming." "Shields are failing." "Get it aboard," Alara said. The final pod docked. Shields dropped completely. A Drekker cruiser closed in, its guns charging for the kill. "Options?" Alara asked. Kale's hands flew over the console. "We can hit it with a full spread from the main cannon, but it'll drain our last power cell." Alara nodded once. "Do it." The cannon fired. The beam struck the Drekker ship across its midsection. The explosion was bright, violent, and beautiful. The ship tore in half, its engines bursting like twin suns. But the Resolve went dark. The lights flickered. The engines stalled. They were now drifting, unpowered, shieldless, and exposed. The bridge fell silent. Outside, 3 more Drekker ships remained. They were turning, and they were coming. Inside, Alara stared at the blank tactical screen. Her ship had saved 200 civilians, but now stood on the edge of total failure. "We need a miracle," she whispered. The vigilant Resolve drifted silently through the cold darkness of space. Fires had been contained. Systems were offline. Only emergency lights flickered along the dark corridors like fading heartbeat monitors. The last Drekker ship destroyed by the main cannon had bought them a short, precious pause. But the remaining enemy warships were closing in again, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Commander Alara Miles stood at the center of the quiet bridge, surrounded by the faint hum of backup power. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical screen, now cracked and dim, showing the approaching Drekker vessels like shadows sliding across ice. The civilians rescued from the freighter were now crammed into the lower decks. 215 people, men, women, children, fragile, terrified, and unarmed. The crew was tired, many wounded. The ship was broken. The enemy was coming. And Alara had one last decision to make. She turned to Kale and Arden, both pale and bruised from the earlier battle. "Status of the engines?" Kale shook his head. "Main drives are shot. Emergency propulsion only. That gives us rotation control, not speed." "Shields?" Arden frowned. "Gone. The emitters are fried." "What about the civilians? Are the escape pods reloaded?" Dara, working at a backup terminal, answered softly, "Yes, but we only have 6 pods left. They can carry maybe 40 people total." Alara went quiet. She looked around at her crew. They were still at their posts, still waiting for orders. They trusted her, but she could see the weight in their eyes. They all knew what this meant. She opened a channel to Chief Ramos in engineering. "Chief, is the fusion core stable?" "No, ma'am," he replied. "It's cracked. We're venting radiation. If we try to bring it back online, we'll blow." That was when an idea hit her. A desperate, reckless, final plan. "Can we control the detonation?" she asked. A long pause. Then Ramos replied, voice low, "If we link the overload to the forward battery grid, yes. But that would be a suicide run." "I know," she said. She cut the channel and looked out the bridge window at the stars. The Drekker ships were closer now, weapons glowing. Time was almost gone. She turned to her crew. "I'm going to give you an order," she said, her voice strong. "And you're not going to like it. Load the civilians into the pods and launch them immediately. I'm also ordering all crew to evacuate with them. That's final." Kale stepped forward. "Commander." "No debate," she said firmly. "This ship has one final job to do, and I'm staying with it." "We won't leave you," Arden said, her voice shaking. "You will," Alara said. "You've done more than anyone could ask. You saved lives. You stood your ground. Let me finish it." Dara's voice cracked. "There's got to be another way." "There isn't. And I won't throw more lives away. Not yours." Her crew stood silent. Then Kale slowly nodded. "Aye, Commander." Word spread quickly. Across the ship, crew and civilians were herded toward the remaining pods. Some cried. Some resisted. Some quietly obeyed. In the hangar, Ramos hugged one of his junior engineers before helping her into a pod. In the medical bay, the doctor handed over her records to a crewman and said, "Make sure this reaches Earth." Back on the bridge, Alara stood alone now. All stations were empty. The lights dimmed as systems failed one by one. The ship was a ghost, but not yet dead. She walked to her quarters once more. The photo of her brother still sat on the desk. She stared at it, then tucked it into the front pocket of her uniform. She returned to the bridge. Ramos's voice came through the comm, one last time. "Core rigged. You've got full control, Commander." "Thank you, Chief. Get out of here." His voice cracked. "Good luck, ma'am." The final pod launched. Outside, they scattered in different directions, programmed for stealth, drifting like space debris, invisible to enemy scanners. The Vigilant Resolve turned slowly to face the oncoming Drekker ships. One last breath. One last shot. Alara sat in the captain's chair and pressed the manual trigger sequence. The fusion core began to pulse. On the Drekker flagship, Overlord Vraxen stood with narrowed eyes. He noticed the human ship wasn't running, wasn't retreating. It was turning. "What are they doing?" one of his officers asked. "Dying," Vraxen muttered. But he didn't expect what came next. The Vigilant Resolve, cracked and broken, surged forward under emergency power. Sparks shot from her hull. Flames leaked from her vents. But she moved with purpose, like a wounded predator with one last bite left. As the ship drew close, her hull lit up. The energy spike was massive, unreadable. Then, boom. A blinding explosion tore through the vacuum of space. Light engulfed the lead Drekker ship. Shockwaves slammed into the others, ripping through their hulls, sending debris flying. 3 Drekker warships were crippled instantly. The others scattered, sensors blind, retreating in confusion. The explosion echoed across comm channels. Silence followed. There was nothing left of the Vigilant Resolve but dust, flame, and legend. Alara Miles had made her final choice. And in doing so, she changed the battlefield. The debris field burned slowly against the dark of space. Where the Vigilant Resolve once stood proud, there was now only wreckage, scattered metal, shattered hull fragments, and the fading pulse of residual energy from the detonation. The Drekker fleet, once moving with precision and pride, now drifted in chaos. Overlord Vraxen stared at the battlefield from the bridge of his warship. Smoke filled the air. Sparks fell from overhead conduits. 2 of his officers lay dead, their bodies crushed by a collapsed beam. Screens flickered, static replacing once clear tactical readouts. His flagship had been hit hard by the blast. Power was unstable. Communications were limited. Of the 6 Drekker warships that had entered the sector, only 2 remained operational. And even they had taken heavy damage. Vraxen's eyes were locked on the empty space ahead. "She rammed us," he muttered. His aide, bleeding from a deep wound across his scalp, nodded. "She turned her ship into a bomb. A human warship, Using its own core, it destroyed 3 of our vessels. Vraxen clenched his fists. She should have run. She should have surrendered. But she hadn't. Commander Alara Miles had died at the helm of a dying ship and taken half his fleet with her. Vraxen had seen 1,000 battles. He had crushed dozens of uprisings, reduced moons to ash, and led sieges across 2 arms of the galaxy. But this was something else. This was defiance. This was sacrifice. And it had cost him. We should pursue the escape pods, another officer suggested. Vraxen waved him off. No, he said. We came for the corridor. It's broken now. The humans will send reinforcements. Our advantage is gone. He stood still for a long moment, then turned to his crew. Withdraw. But sir. Withdraw, he repeated. This war is not over, but this battle is finished. And the galaxy will remember this day. His ship, battered and bruised, slowly turned and jumped to warp. The remaining Drekker forces followed, disappearing into the dark like angry ghosts. Far from the debris field, silent escape pods drifted through the stars. One by one, hidden under stealth plating and using low power signals, they made contact with friendly forces. Rescue vessels from nearby sectors, alerted by brief emergency beacons, arrived and began recovery. Inside one of the pods, Kale stared out a small round window. He hadn't spoken in hours. Across from him, Arden sat holding a young child from the freighter, comforting her with a thin blanket. She did it, Arden whispered. Kale nodded. His voice was hoarse. She bought us the time we needed. Pod after pod was pulled aboard the rescue ships. Civilians were rushed to medical bays. Crew members were debriefed and treated for injuries. Many were alive because of Alara's final decision. On the lead rescue ship, the admiral in command, a grim woman with gray hair and cold eyes, read the full report and stood in silence. Alara Miles, she whispered. You magnificent fool. Then she turned to her staff. Send a signal to command. Tell them the Vigilant Resolve is lost, but not defeated. Tell them the corridor stands. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread quickly. Within days, every military outpost, colony station, and trade hub knew what had happened. A lone human warship had held the line. One commander had defied a superior force. The Drekker Dominion had tasted defeat. A holographic image of Alara Miles was placed in the Hall of Valor. A single line beneath her name. We are the line. Across human space, young cadets learned her story. Veterans spoke her name with pride. Even non-human allies began to look at humanity with new eyes filled with respect, not pity. Because a single ship had made a stand. Because one commander had made the impossible choice. Because the final blow hadn't just destroyed ships. It had changed the course of the war. Years passed. The war between humanity and the Drekker Dominion did not end overnight. But it changed. What had once been a slow invasion turned into a tense stalemate. The Drekker pushed no further into human territory. Their fleets approached borders but no longer crossed them without fear. And that fear began on the edge of the outer spiral rim, with a ship that stood alone. With a commander who chose to die so others could live. With a moment the galaxy could not forget. The story of the Vigilant Resolve spread far beyond human space. It was translated into the languages of the Saren Coalition, the Vunari clans, even the cold and ancient minds of the Tellenic architects. Wherever the tale was told, it echoed with the same message. A single act of courage can stop a tide of war. On the planet Lasara, a quiet world orbiting a twin-star system, a monument stood atop a grassy cliff overlooking the sea. Made of scorched black stone and folded metal salvage from the wreckage, it was shaped like a rising blade, sharp, proud, unmoving. At its base, a plaque bore simple words. To Commander Alara Miles and the crew of the Vigilant Resolve. They held the line. They changed the map. Visitors came often. Soldiers. Civilians. Families who never knew her but owed their lives to her choice. Flowers were placed at the base. Small holograms flickered with recorded messages of thanks. Inside the Naval Academy on Earth, a lecture hall full of cadets sat in quiet attention. At the front, a tall instructor stood beneath a large holo display. On it was a moving diagram of the battle in the outer spiral rim. Red Drekker ships. One small blue dot, the Resolve. Most of you already know the facts, the instructor said. But I want you to think beyond the numbers. Think about what this means. He walked across the room slowly. This wasn't a victory built on superior firepower. It wasn't one with advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. It was one because someone refused to back down. A single warship. A single leader. He stopped in front of a young cadet in the first row. The cadet wore a clean new uniform, boots polished, shoulders straight. Her name badge read, Miles, J. The instructor glanced at her. "You're related?" "Yes, sir," she said. "Alara was my aunt." The instructor nodded. "You have big shoes to fill." The girl smiled faintly. "She'd tell me to fill my own." The room chuckled softly. Then the instructor turned back to the screen. "This," he said, pointing at the moment of detonation, was the turning point. The day humanity stopped being seen as weak. The day we earned our place in the galaxy. He looked out across the room. "Don't forget what one ship, one crew, and one leader can do." Far above Earth's orbit, the new generation of warships patrolled the stars. Stronger, faster, but all carrying the same name etched along their hulls. Resolve class. The spirit of the original ship lived on, not just in steel and firepower, but in belief. Belief that even in the darkest moment, courage mattered. That sacrifice meant something. That one stand could draw a line not just in space, but in history. And in a small home on the moon colony of New Tycho, an old man sat in a quiet room, staring out a window. On the table beside him sat a photo. 2 children, laughing. A younger Alara, hair tied back, holding her brother's hand. His hand. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "You did it, Alara." They remember. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. She had left him grief, but also pride. Outside his window, a Resolve-class ship passed silently across the stars, its hull catching the light of the sun. The galaxy had moved on, but it had not forgotten. The day the Vigilant Resolve made her last stand became a date marked in history books, military training, and memorials across the stars. It wasn't the day humanity won the war. It was the day humanity earned its place at the table. A day when maps were redrawn, not with lines of conquest, but with the name of a ship. And the legacy of those who refused to fall.